All right, folks, this is some of the most powerful lawyers in the case. Motion to dismiss against J.P. Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank. Ongoing case currently, United States District Court, Eastern District of Tennessee at Greenville. We see case number 219-CV-005. Now, this is a big old thick brief where some of the best lawyers, in fact, two giant law firms, have gone to great lengths to attempt to get a massive fraud case, a bank secrecy, racketeering conspiracy, Qui-Tom whistleblower case thrown out against J.P. Morgan Chase, Deutsche Bank, Premier Mortgage Funding Brokering Services, and the Select Portfolio Mafia. Now, ladies and gentlemen, everybody knows who this is. I'm the fellow that blew the bloody stinking whistle on the savings and loan real estate racketeering scandals back in the 1980s. Long before anybody ever heard of Occupy, and way before the creation of Anonymous. This fella right here was in the Houston Chronicle and the Houston Post. I was on ABC News, NBC News, and CBS News, even on PBS News back in the early 1980s, busting up the massive savings and loan and banking swindles of world history. It was history making. Now, the reason that I'm able to do these things is I come from a family of real estate developers and grew up in northern New York at a place today known as the Harris Bay Yacht Club, where my mother and father, Clifford and Anita Witham, developed and built a very large marina on 600 acres right on Lake George, right on the lake. But in any event, let's get back to my point here. I want to talk about the $9 billion witness. Her name's Eleni Fleischman. She was a bank analyst for J.P. Morgan Chase and worked on Wall Street, and began to blow the whistle to the SEC and to other government regulators about the racketeering conspiracy of these big banks to package up their scratch and dent mortgages, where liar's loans were the rule of the day, and huge numbers of people were allowed to get home mortgages with flimsy or non-existent credit backgrounds and stated income, where the borrower just got to, evade and not have to go through an actual credit and employment check. These banks realized that when they could take these scratch and dent loans and package them up into bundles and sell them as securities, the banks realized that, they actually engineered it. It was designed by the banking architects this way to allow the big banks to make huge amounts of money selling these scratch and dent securities packages of bad loans for large amounts of money. Now, going back to the 1980s, I look at this Eleni Fleischman. She's noted as being the $9 billion witness. Well, this fella right here, old Judson Witham, when I began to blow the whistle to the FBI and to the Texas State Attorney Generals and to local prosecutors up at Conroe, Texas, in Montgomery County, just immediately north of the banking center in Houston. When I began to blow the whistle on all the real estate fraud and the scams and the schemes involving all these bank loans and selling or assigning of the contracts of sale, the sales contracts on these large pieces of real estate, thousands and thousands of pieces of real estate all over Conroe, Montgomery County, Texas, and then tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of other pieces of real estate all over the United States. When I began to blow the whistle to HUD at Greenway Plaza, that's right there behind Joel Osteen's Oasis of Love there, I forget the name of that church, it'll come to me here in a minute, but Joel Osteen's church at the old Summit Arena Tower. It's right behind the Summit at the Greenway Plaza. The HUD offices were alerted for the fraud in the real estate developments that I was exposing. And I spent a lot of time down at 515 Rusk in Senators and Congressmen's office, and they had blown the whistle very early on to the FBI. Christopher Wray and William Barr, this guy right here, in the earliest part of the 1980s, blew the lid off the savings and loan and banking scandal associated with all the real estate swindling, scheming, and scamming of the 1980s. I have been the multi-trillion-dollar witness. But let's get back to Alani Fleshman, Eleni, I guess her name is, Fleshman, who blew the whistle on some securities matters with J.P. Morgan. She's referred to as the $9 billion witness. Her experience with the Justice Department and the FBI, the SEC, and so on and so forth, bank regulators of the United States government, was that she was blocked at every turn. They did everything they could to not deal with Eleni Fleshman, and tried to cover up and conceal what she was trying to blow the whistle on at J.P. Morgan Chase, old Jamie Dimon's little financial mafia. Sorry, Mr. Dimon there, Demon, whatever your name is. J.P. Morgan Chase, these fellas right here, y'all a bunch of freaking gangsters. That's a real case, ladies and gentlemen. That's a very real case. Cause number 219-CV-005, and you can see it's Deutsche Bank, J.P. Morgan Chase, and the list goes on and on and on. They did their best to get the case thrown out, and, well, Judge Clifton L. Corker in Greenville, Tennessee, in the Eastern Federal District Courts of Tennessee said, no, we're going forward with the case. They got shot down on their Rule 12b-6 and their Rule 56 motions for failure to state a case and motions for summary judgment. But that's all legalese and lawyer speak, so we'll talk about that some other time. Folks, here's where I'm going with this whole thing. This giant banking fiasco that began about, 80, 90, 100 years ago has been going on all through the 1900s, and, well, it all blew up in everybody's face in 2006, 7, and 8, right? But it had actually been just carried over and continued from the banking and savings and loan fiascos of the 1980s and 1990s. They never stopped because the cost of doing business, the fines and penalties, and any other enforcement that was carried out during the 80s and 90s resulted essentially in a slap on the wrist against these very large campaign contributors. Did I say campaign contributions? And the answer is, yep. You see, these great big bankster sons of bitches, they provide huge amounts of money to presidential candidates and to congressional and Senate candidates and to judges and sheriffs and county judges and commissioners' court and town councils and local police departments. These great big banks, they spread so much campaign cash around that basically they own the Congress and they own the Senate. And they own HUD and They own FHA and FHFA, and the VA and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and they basically bought the system, according to the New York Times and Gretchen Morgensen. They bought the system. They paid everybody off with campaign contributions and, emoluments, as some friends of mine would call them. They gave them huge emoluments to make things go away. They paid the cost of doing business, and they keep right on rocking and rolling with all this fraud. Now, not to make a big deal out of this thing, but this is a great big old attempt by the best lawyers basically in the country. Well, maybe they're the worst lawyers in the country. Who knows? Trey Gowdy. Trey Gowdy works for him now. He's protecting white-collar criminals over at J.P. Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank there. Trey Gowdy. You got some explaining to do, Mr. Gowdy. And a lot of explaining to do, along with your FBI and Department of Justice clowns that, they just kind of got caught with their pants down trying to destroy a national election by rigging it. The FBI and the Justice Department, along with the Clintons and the Bushes and the candlestick makers, they tried to and spent an awful lot of money and expended a whole lot of effort to rig and destroy a United States presidential election. And I wonder how many other elections the FBI and the Department of Justice have rigged. William Barr and Mr. Wray, Christopher Wray and William Barr. I think we really need to talk about how J.P. Morgan Chase and the boys have set up the chessboard and stacked the cards and the checkers. They've fixed the checkerboard so that they always win. Now, here's a message to all my mortgage fraud researchers and the people out across the United States that are fighting all this mortgage fraud. You constantly hear people talking about millions of dollars and billions of dollars and trillions of dollars. Well, let me make something perfectly clear. They're reserve notes. They're central bank notes. Take some time and read what are known as the legal tender cases. The legal tender cases, you can find them on any search engine of your choice and read about legal tender versus specie and dollars and reserve notes. There's distinctions to be made, ladies and gentlemen, as a matter of fact and as a matter of law. This banking system in the United States is the biggest crime scene and crime spree in human history. Christopher Wray and William Barr, Maxine Waters, Patrick McHenry, and Adam Schiff, and Donald Trump. President Donald Trump, the real estate developer debutante, currently President of the United States. So you understand these issues. And you also understand a little gang of people called the Triad. Bin Laden, Khashoggi, and Ghebbanifar. Charlie Wilson, Joanna Herring King, Oliver North, Richard Secord, Bill Casey, John C. McCone of the Western Banks. That's the gang of gangster slobs that I fought very hard to expose in Texas in the 1980s. Now, back to Eleni Fleischman here for a minute, the $9 billion witness who began to expose J.P. Morgan Chase. The government did everything they could to shut her up. J.P. Morgan Chase did everything they could to shut her up, including fired her from her job. And that's the reason I'm making this video. Ladies and gentlemen, when I began blowing the whistle against the Western Banks of Houston, and the thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of illegal land sales and illegal land transactions, not just in Texas, but all over the United States. And ultimately, it has been revealed to be a global scam, a global scheme, worldwide. When I began to expose this massive fraud at the Federal Bureau of Investigation offices and at United States Senator John Towers' office, and well, the list just goes on and on from there. This is back during the Jimmy Carter administration, for Christ's sakes, and the earliest part of the first Ronald Reagan administration and the second Ronald Reagan administration, and then obviously we got the Clintons and the Bushes, and this went on for years. The United States government has done everything it can to shut me up, silence me, even using some of those rotten, dirty tactics we all know they're famous for in the recent efforts to rig and destroy a national presidential election cycle here during the most recent Clinton-Donald Trump campaigns. The FBI and the Department of Justice were involved in the biggest fraud of the modern times, rigging a U.S. presidential election. Just like the CIA rigs elections and all these little banana republics and around the world. Fascinating stuff, William Barr. And Christopher Wray, I think this bankster gangster episode, this never-ending story of using the central banknotes and the Federal Reserve and all these elaborate schemes and scams, all this, what do they call, oh yeah, mortgage fraud, all this mortgage fraud that they, that's a real case, ladies and gentlemen. Let me see if I can get that up in there. 219 CV 0005 against Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan Chase, Premier Mortgage Funding, Select Portfolio Services Incorporated. You cannot successfully, if there is such a thing, you can't perpetrate this level of fraud and thievery without the pigeons, without the suckers, the targets of the fraud. In other words, you can't have subprime mortgages bundled up into securities offerings without all the borrowers. You got to have the dumb idiots to sign up for the loans in the first place, so you got something to bundle up, and you got something to market to pension funds and to the insurance companies and to the investors. Without bundling up all these scratch and dent loans from the suckers, from the targets, from the pigeons, the whole house of cards falls because you don't have anything to sell. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the borrowers, the wannabe homeowners that signed up for these scratch and dent loans, these alternate A, they call them alternate A loans. They're scratch and dent churning loans. They churn them just like butter. They churn them. None of it works without the targets, without the suckers. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the entire house of cards of all this fraud, all of it, is built on the backs of the people that signed up to get the mortgages, I guess. And you can bet you one thing, that's exactly how it was intentionally designed and engineered by the big banks to work. So in a racketeering scheme, let's get down to the nuts and bolts here. In a racketeering scheme, none of it works without targeting the consuming public. It all falls apart, Eric Holder, former Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch. Jeff Sessions, you want to chime in here on how all of this does not work without the suckers, the targets, the pigeons. It's integral to the scheme. You can't have a scheme without the people that signed up for these scratch and dent mortgages. Now, a short message to Eleni Fleischman and a short message to Matt Taibbi. All of this bank fraud and all of this savings and loan and real estate racketeering, all of it, began when I started blowing a stinking whistle in Houston, Texas, to the Houston Chronicle, to the former Houston Post, the Conroe Courier, newspapers from Humboldt to the Woodlands. We spoke to papers in Dallas, the Dallas Morning News, the papers out in San Antonio. We were on ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, Fox, and even PBS. We were in congressional hearings. I went absolutely to the ends of the earth to blow the whistle on what began all of this. This is very real, ladies and gentlemen. This is fresh. The federal court in Greenville, Tennessee, Judge Clifton L. Corker just denied to some of the best lawyers in the world their motions to dismiss and close and shut down our case. Well, my case. They lost. Which brings me to this point. There's a whole lot more of the detail and facts and the mechanics of how these real estate schemes and scams work, and all these campaign donations and the rigging of elections that these gangster banksters finance. Because you see Jimmy Comey and Robert Mueller and that whole little cast of characters swirling in the toilet around the Clinton State Department, Clinton State Campaign Foundation, or however the Clinton Mafia was running the government with Eric Schneiderman and Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch. And then, of course, we had the Obama Nation, the Abomination years there, where they covered this all up. Sorry, Barack Obama, but you and your administration covered it all. You rigged it. Right along with the Clintons and the Bushes and the Cheneys and the Gores, and I mean, I can name politicians all day long. Maxine Waters, Adam Schiff, Patrick McHenry. The massive, unbelievable, gargantuan looting of the U.S. banking system for trillions of those printed up out of thin air quantitative reserve notes, the quantitative easing money, the engineered, what do they call, oh yeah, fiat script, the shin plaster. Shin plaster. Now, folks, I want to remind you of something. Judge Clifton L. Corker, this is their motion to dismiss. And, well, they got shot down. They couldn't dribble it past me. I'm the guy that successfully shot down J.P. Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank and their money laundering schemes with Premier Mortgage and Select Portfolio Services. This guy right here. The $36 trillion, well, reserve note. The $36 trillion reserve note witness. And if anybody thinks this video is a joke, let's roll it down to this for the United States Secret Service. Rick Williams, he's the head of corporate security for ConocoPhillips Oil at the Woodlands, Texas. Rick Williams, former U.S. Secret Service agent Williams. Pay close attention. When I began blowing the whistle on the savings and loans and banks in the earliest part of the 1980s in Houston, Texas, the government of the United States did everything it could to destroy me. The bankster gangsters that I was exposing did everything they could to destroy me. The officials of Montgomery County, Texas, did everything they could to shut me up and shut me down and destroy me and run me out of town. Sheriff Rand Henderson and the district attorney and county attorney for Montgomery County, Texas, you people got a whole lot of explaining to do with Judge Stephen McKeithen and Nelda Luce Radabau Blair, a former news analyst with CNN News, lawyer for the First American Title Insurance Company and the Montgomery County Attorney's Office, along with Marcus Winberry. I guess he's still the attorney for the city of Conroe. Marcus Winberry, you got a lot of explaining to do, friend. This massive, gargantuan robbery and looting of the U.S. banking and savings and loan system, the pensions, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHFA, Wall Street, it all began to come unraveled when this guy right here from Harris Bay at Lake George, New York, remember that 600-acre marina, the Harris Bay Yacht Club, this guy right here began to expose the massive real estate scheming and scamming that was at the very heart of the most recent bank lootings and lootings of Wall Street, because you see, none of this works without the real estate. Right, Hillary Clinton? Come on, Bill Clinton, chime in here, Barack Obama. Let's talk about how you can't have all this mortgage. You can't have all the mortgage fraud and all the bogus securities and all the other racketeering. You can't have any of it without the targets, the suckers, the pigeons, and all that dirt dealing. All those real estate transactions are the heart of it. It's the epicenter. The real estate and financing contracts. Oh, which brings me to a closing point. Excuse me, folks, I got a little bit of pollen. Got allergies to this pollen this spring. Any contract of sale or any sales contract. Judge Stephen McKeithen, Nelda Luce Radabau Blair, and Judge Barb Allen Sadler, Sheriff Rand Henderson, any sales contract or any contract of sale. What's the difference? Any sales contract or any contract of sale. Is there some kind of a difference in the two versions of sales contracts? And the answer is, they're all contracts of sale. They're all executionary. Every contract of sale, every sales contract, all of them are executionary contracts. Judge Stephen McKeithen. So when people kind of scratch their head and wonder what I'm talking about, these are the nuts and bolts of dirt dealing and real estate swindling that makes all this bank fraud and savings and loan and mortgage brokering fraud work. You got to have the dirt deals and you got to have the suckers, as old W.C. Fields would say. Folks, look for all the research and information you want in the links below, and remember one thing, Eleni Fleischman. Long before the Justice Department and the FBI and the SEC dropped the ball on you when you were trying to expose J.P. Morgan Chase, there's a whole lot more to the story. There's a whole lot more to this story. You say, that's their motion to dismiss, man. They threw every trick in the book at me to get me thrown out of court. And the answer is, you lose. You lost, Trey Gowdy. This is Trey Gowdy's law firm here, Nelson and Mullins and Baker and Donaldson. That was Senator Howard Baker and Tom Daschle. That's Tom Daschle's law firm there, old Baker and Donaldson. Folks, you've got some very crooked government officials that are tied to the attempt to destroy an American election cycle with a U.S. president, directly involved in greasing the tracks and foaming the runway for the crookedest banks in human history. And Christopher Wray and William Barr, if you don't like what I've got to say, y'all can kiss my ass. William Barr, Attorney General of the United States, and Christopher Wray over at FBI, maybe we ought to sit down and have a national telecast and a discussion about how all those land deals in California and Arizona and Florida and Texas and, Pennsylvania and Missouri, and Nevada, and Alaska, and Hawaii. Stuff's all over the country. Oregon, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Indiana, Illinois, the Dakotas. Let's talk about all these land deals, Christopher Wray and William Barr. You know, the red flag, wildcat, unrecorded, ghost, phantom, paper, the paper land cons, the dirt dealings. Oh yeah, they're also called colonias. The Mexicans call them colonias or colonia. I think that wraps it up, President Trump. We need to have a full-scale, full-blown Senate and congressional series of hearings into why so much dirt dealing and flipping and daisy chaining Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. Let's bring Hillary and Bill Clinton down here, and we'll have us a discussion on how you use less than honorable and less than honest real estate scheming and scamming to rob the world for trillions. You see all this real estate scheming and scamming. There's how you spell Ari Fleischman's name, Eleni Fleischman, the $9 million witness. Yeah, I got your $9 million beat by a few trillion, Miss Fleischman. And Matt Taibbi over to Rolling Stone. Man, I'll tell you what, we need to talk about the big picture. Folks, we'll leave it right there, and always hasta la vista. God bless. And you know one thing for certain, we're coming back. And make sure you do some investigation and reading into how real estate is used to launder trillions. They use real estate mortgages and rather elaborate, well, Joel Lieberman, right? Elaborate schemes to hocus pocus and make all that dirty money disappear. Folks, we'll leave it right there. We will be back next time.